All right, settle in, everyone. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that, honestly, comes up constantly in English. It's a skill that's really crucial if you want to sound confident
Mm,
and, really participate fully in conversations. We're doing a deep dive into expressing your opinions clearly.
that's right. Because, think about it. So much of our daily communication really revolves around sharing what we think or feel about things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether it's just a casual chat about a movie, or maybe you're brainstorming at work, or even in classroom
We're
discussion.
just scrolling online comments.
Exactly. Someone, somewhere is going to ask, so what do you think about this?
And that's often where people hit a bit of a wall, isn't it? Based on the material we've been digging into, this seems like a really common frustration point for English learners.
Huh?
You might have the grammar down, you know plenty of words, but when that specific question hits, what did you think of the presentation? Or your take on this new plan? Sometimes you just freeze.
Yeah, freeze up. Or maybe you fall back on just saying, I think,
Yeah.
again and again.
Right. Or you give those really short answers like, oh, it was good, or it's okay.
Fine.
Yeah, fine. Or even, I don't know, when actually you probably do have some thoughts brewing.
And that brevity, well, it's understandable, feeling put on the spot.
Yeah.
But in many English-speaking contexts, it can sometimes leave the listener wanting a bit more.
Yeah. Wanting the why.
Exactly. There's often this expectation, maybe unspoken, that you won't just give the verdict, but you'll offer a little bit of the reasoning behind it. Why was it good? What makes you say that?
Yeah, the reasons and the examples, that's what really adds the meat to the conversation, doesn't
It
it?
really does. It adds depth. It adds color.
Totally. Like saying, that new cafe is good. Okay, fine. But where does the conversation go from there?
Not very far, usually.
But if you can say why, like, oh, that new cafe. Yeah, I liked it. The atmosphere was really relaxed and they had this amazing almond croissant. Or, the service was surprisingly quick for a place that just opened.
Right. Suddenly you've given the other person specific things they can react to. They can say,
Mhm.
oh, I love a good croissant, or really, I heard the service was slow.
Yeah,
That's where the real back and forth starts.
exactly. So that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to pull apart the sort of mechanics of expressing opinions, all based on the sources we've looked at.
Hmm.
We want to give you the language tools, the phrases, but also the kind of structural know-how, how
Yeah.
to state your view, explain why, and handle those tricky moments of agreeing or disagreeing smoothly, politely, confidently.
Sounds good. So where do we start maybe with those initial phrases?
Yeah.
How you actually signal, okay, here comes my opinion.
Perfect starting point. Let's unpack that because just like launching straight into your idea,
Yeah.
sometimes it can feel a little, I don't know, abrupt.
You may be a bit blunt. Using one of these introductory phrases, it's like putting up a little signpost,
It's
isn't it?
exactly a signpost. It tells the listener, okay, perspective incoming. And it adds, depending on the phrase, maybe a touch of formality or consideration. It shows you're, structuring your thought.
Absolutely. It's about framing it.
Yeah.
You're making it clear that what follows isn't necessarily a universal fact, but it's your view, your take.
Right. And while, okay, I think is the absolute workhorse, isn't it? It's fine a lot of the time, especially when things are casual.
Oh, for sure. We all use I think constantly. Nothing wrong with it.
But having other tools in the toolbox, that makes your language more precise, right? It helps you sound a bit more nuanced, maybe more emphatic when you need to be.
Spot on. And the material we looked at gave a really solid set of these sort of foundational phrases. Not too many, but enough to give you real options.
Okay, so let's dig into those essentials. What were some of the key ones highlighted?
All right. Starting with maybe the most straightforward, most versatile one, in my opinion.
The classic.
The absolute classic. It's clear, everyone understands it, and it works pretty much anywhere. Casual chats, formal reports, you name it. It just clearly flags. This is my viewpoint. In my opinion, this strategy is the best way forward. Simple, effective.
Okay, gold standard. What else?
Then there's, I personally believe that. Adding that word personally gives it a bit more weight, don't you think?
Yeah, it feels stronger, more individual.
Exactly. It suggests this is something you've thought about. Maybe it's a deeply held conviction. It can be useful if you know your opinion might be different from others. I personally believe that taking the risk is worth it. It highlights it's your specific, considered belief.
You like that. Adds emphasis. Okay, next.
From my point of view, this one's interesting because it subtly highlights your perspective, your angle.
Ah, like you're acknowledging that your background or experience shapes your view.
Precisely. It implies that Someone else looking from a different angle might see it differently. So it can be a really good, gentle way to introduce an opinion that might contrast with someone else's. From my point of view, focusing on customer retention makes more sense right now than acquisition. It frames it based on your specific viewpoint.
That's useful. It implicitly acknowledges other views might exist. What about a softer option?
That would probably be, I would say that. This one often comes across as a little more cautious, maybe slightly hesitant.
Like you're not hammering it home as a definite fact.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It can suggest you're being careful, or maybe you're not 100% certain, or perhaps you just want to sound more tentative, more collaborative, maybe.
Well, I would say that the proposal needs a bit more work. It softens the delivery. Great if you want to avoid sounding too forceful or dogmatic.
Okay, that makes sense. A good one for delicate situations, perhaps. And the last one on that initial list, as far as I'm concerned. This one's a bit different. It often narrows the scope. It implies that your opinion is focused on what matters to you, or within a specific context you care about.
So, like, you're zeroing in on one aspect.
Often, yes. It can sometimes subtly suggest you might not care as much about other parts, or that this is your really strong feeling on this particular issue. For instance, look, the design is okay, the features are fine, but as far as I'm concerned, the price is just too high. See how it pins the main objection to the price.
Yeah, it puts the emphasis squarely on that one factor from your perspective.
Got it. Those are all really useful distinctions. Each one subtly changes the flavor, doesn't it?
It really does.
The material used that example. What do you think about learning English online? Let's play with that using these phrases. It really brings them to life.
Okay, great idea. So, someone asks you that question. Instead of just, it's good or it's bad, like, let's try framing it.
Using the classic first. In my opinion, right? In my opinion, online learning offers incredible flexibility, which is a huge advantage for busy people. Straightforward, opinion stated, brief reason hinted at.
Clear. Now, what if you want to emphasize it's your strong personal feeling?
Then maybe. I personally believe that online learning is just as effective, if not more effective, than traditional classes, provided you have the right resources and motivation. The personally believe adds that conviction.
Okay. And if you're speaking from, say, your experience as a student who's tried both?
Then from my point of view, it works perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
From my point of view, having experienced both, the biggest challenge of online learning isn't the quality, it's maintaining self-discipline when you don't have fixed class times. It links directly to your perspective.
See, that really highlights the angle aspect.
Nice.
And the softer one, I would say that.
Maybe you see pros and cons. I would say that online learning can be fantastic, but it really depends on the platform and the instructor's ability to engage students virtually. A bit more cautious, acknowledging variables.
Right. The can be and depends on fit well with, I would say. And finally, focusing on one key aspect with, as far as I'm concerned.
You could say, as far as I'm concerned, the main benefit of online English learning is the access it gives you to native speaker teachers from anywhere in the world, focusing squarely on that specific advantage.
Brilliant. Hearing them used like that really demonstrates how they work. It's not just about introducing the opinion, they subtly communicate how you hold that opinion, Is it firm? Is it based on experience? Are you being cautious?
Exactly. It adds that layer of sophistication and makes your response sound much more structured, more considered, compared to just jumping in.
Okay, so we've successfully framed our opinion. Stage one complete. But as we said earlier, just stating it often isn't quite enough, is it?
Definitely not. That's often just the opening line.
The material really hammered home the need to back it up. So let's move to part two. Giving reasons. Why is adding the why so fundamentally important in English conversations?
Well, it's crucial for several reasons, really. If you just state an opinion, this plan won't work without saying why, it can sound, well, a bit arbitrary, maybe even dismissive.
Like you haven't really thought it through?
Exactly, or that you expect people to just accept your verdict. Providing reasons or examples does a few key things. First, it makes your opinion way more credible. It shows there's thought behind it.
Makes sense.
Second, it makes it more persuasive. If you want someone to see things your way, you need to give them the logic that got you there.
Right, you're building a case, essentially.
You are. And maybe most importantly, for a flowing conversation, it gives the other person something concrete to actually respond to. They can engage with your reasons.
So it turns it from just like a statement dropped into the room into an actual invitation for discussion.
Precisely. is the difference between a monologue and a dialogue, in a way.
Okay, so it's vital. And the sources gave us some specific connecting phrases, didn't they? The sort of linguistic glue to stick the opinion to the reason?
Yes, and these are super helpful for making that connection really clear and smooth. Some of the core ones they mentioned were,
Go on.
the reason I think that is because, very explicit, leaves absolutely no doubt that what's coming next is the justification for the opinion you just gave. I prefer working from home. The reason I think that is because I save 2 hours on commuting every day. Crystal clear link.
Very direct. What's a slightly more streamlined version?
That's because, much more common in everyday speech, I'd say. It flows really naturally. I prefer working from home. That's because I save 2 hours on commuting. Same, meaning just a bit quicker.
Okay, yeah, I can hear that being used a lot.
Right.
What if you have more than one reason?
Then one reason for this is perfect. It signals that you're starting a list of supporting points. I think switching suppliers is a good idea. One reason for this is the potential cost saving. Another reason is their better reliability record. It helps you organize multiple justifications really clearly.
That's great for building a stronger case. And the classic for illustration.
For example, absolutely essential. This is how you move from a general point to a specific concrete instance that makes your reason much easier to grasp. The reliability record is better. For example, our current supplier had 3 major delays last quarter alone. It provides the proof.
Okay, let's bring these to life again. The material used the example. Do you think watching TV is a good way to learn English?
Right. So let's say your opinion is, yes, it is a good way. How do you support that beyond just saying yes?
Using because.
Okay. Yes, I think watching TV can be a really helpful tool for learning English. That's because you get to hear how people actually speak in relaxed situations, with natural intonation and rhythm.
Much better than just yes. You explain the how. What about using one reason if you have multiple benefits in mind?
You could expand on that. Yes, definitely. One reason for this is that it massively improves your listening skills, especially with different accents. Another important reason is that you pick up loads of vocabulary, particularly idioms and slang, that you might not find in textbooks.
I see how that lets you build up the argument, point by point. Very organized. And where would, for example, fit in here?
You could add it on to one of those points, like after mentioning vocabulary. You pick up loads of vocabulary. For example, I learned a lot of informal greetings just by watching American sitcoms. Or about listening skills. Improves your listening skills. For example, trying to follow the fast dialogue in a show like Sherlock really pushes you to listen actively.
That makes the benefit so much more tangible. You're not just saying vocabulary, you're showing how you get it. It really feels like opinions gain so much weight and become much more engaging when you consistently add that support structure.
They absolutely do. It's the difference between, say, this book is boring, and I found this book a bit boring. The reason I think that is because the plot moved really slowly in the first half. For example, there were several chapters where almost nothing happened to advance the story.
Totally different impact. The second one gives you something to discuss, even if you disagree. You can say, oh, I didn't find it slow. I thought the character development was.
Exactly. It opens the door. The first one just kind of closes it.
Okay, this is making a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we can state our opinion clearly using those introductory phrases. We can back it up convincingly using reasons and examples with linking words. But conversations aren't just about broadcasting our own views, are they?
Not at all. They're interactive. You're constantly reacting to what other people say.
Which brings us to the sometimes a delicate art of agreeing and disagreeing.
Indeed. And this is an area where, as the source material points out, cultural nuances really come into play, especially in English-speaking context.
How so?
Well, how you handle agreement, and particularly disagreement, can significantly affect how people perceive you. Are you seen as collaborative, open-minded, polite, or maybe confrontational, difficult, even rude? In many English-speaking cultures, especially in professional or more formal social settings, being too blunt, particularly when disagreeing, can be a real misstep.
Right. So learning the polite ways to do it is a crucial social skill, not just a language skill.
Absolutely. Let's start with the easier side, agreeing. How do you show you're totally on board with what someone said?
What are some good phrases for that?
When you completely agree, you want to be clear about it. The material suggested several really useful ones. I completely agree with you. Can't get much clearer than that. Direct, unambiguous agreement.
Simple and effective.
That's a really good point. I like this one because it does more than just agree. It actively validates the other person's contribution.
Yeah, it shows you appreciate their thinking. Good for building rapport.
Definitely. I see what you mean. This shows you've understood their logic, their perspective. And when you say it in response to an opinion you share, it strongly implies agreement. Like, ah, yes, I follow you and I'm right there with you.
Okay, implies agreement through understanding.
And then a more casual one. I think so too. Perfect for everyday situations. Quick agreement on simpler things. This coffee is great. Yeah, I think so too.
Got it. Those cover straightforward agreement. But often, it's not quite black and white, is it? You might agree with part of what someone said, but not all of it. Or you agree, but you want to add a condition or a different angle. This partial agreement seems really important.
Oh, it's incredibly useful. It's probably one of the most common conversational moves, really. It lets you acknowledge the other person's point, which is polite and shows you're listening before you introduce your own nuance or slightly different view.
So it softens the introduction of your own idea.
Exactly. It makes your differing perspective easier for them to hear because you first validated something they said. The sources gave some excellent templates for this. I see your point, but the absolute classic structure. I see your point, acknowledgement, but signal of a contrasting or additional thought coming.
I hear you, however.
Precisely. That's true, but I also think that, similar logic, that's true, validates their statement. But I also think introduces your supplementary or alternative idea.
Okay, validating that adding.
I agree to some extent, but this one is very explicit about the degree of agreement. You're saying, yes, up to this point or on this aspect, I'm with you, however.
Right, clearly marking the boundary of your agreement. Let's
Yeah.
use that fast food example again from the material. Someone says, fast food is terrible for your health. How would partial agreement work there?
Okay, so that's a strong general statement. Instead of just arguing, you could use partial agreement. Using, I see your point, but
Yeah.
I see your point. Some fast food can definitely be really unhealthy with all the fat and sugar. But I think it's probably okay occasionally, if you eat it in moderation.
Ah, okay. So you agreed with the premise, it can be unhealthy, but added the nuance of moderation. That feels much less argumentative than just saying, no, it's fine sometimes.
Exactly. You respected their initial point. Or using, that's true, but yes, that's true. A lot of fast food isn't nutritionally great. But I also think that sometimes it's incredibly convenient, especially if you're traveling or really short on time.
Again, you validate the nutritional point, but add a different factor convenience. It keeps the conversation going and explores different facets.
Precisely. It acknowledges complexity. And using, I agree to some extent, but I agree to some extent that fast food is unhealthy. But nowadays, many chains are offering healthier options like salads or grilled chicken. So it's not all bad. Here you're agreeing with the general idea, but pointing out exceptions.
This partial agreement technique seems incredibly valuable for navigating potentially tricky conversations without causing friction. Okay, now for the really tricky part. Outright disagreement. What if you just fundamentally see things differently? How do you say that politely?
This is definitely where learners need to be most careful, I think, because directness varies so much culture to culture and even situation to situation. In many English-speaking environments, especially professional or polite social ones, saying you're wrong or even a blunt I disagree can come across as quite harsh.
Yeah, it can shut things down fast.
It really can. So you need ways to signal your different view more softly. The material suggested several good phrases for this. I'm not sure I agree with that. This is very gentle. Notice it focuses on your uncertainty. I'm not sure I agree. Rather than stating their idea is wrong, it softens the blow significantly.
It's indirect. I like that.
I see things a little differently. This uses a nice metaphor. It suggests you're both looking at the same issue, just from different perspectives or angles. It implies that neither view is necessarily wrong, just different. It's quite collaborative, inviting them to consider your angle.
Frames it as perspective, not correctness.
Good one. Actually, I have a different opinion on that. This one is a bit more direct in stating you have a different opinion, but starting with actually often works as a softener in English when you're about to contradict or correct something gently. It cushions it slightly compared to just launching into, I have a different opinion.
Interesting how actually works there. So all of these avoid that really blunt no or I disagree. They create a bit of space, a bit of politeness.
That's the key. They prioritize keeping the conversation open and maintaining the relationship while still clearly communicating that your viewpoint differs. Mastering these polite disagreement phrases is, I think, crucial for sounding like a really adept communicator in English.
Absolutely. This whole breakdown stating reasoning, agreeing, partially agreeing, disagreeing, it goes way beyond just knowing the words. It's about using them strategically.
It really is.
Now let's widen the lens a bit. We touched on cultural nuances, but let's talk more about that general landscape. The material mentioned how expressing opinions is viewed in places like the US and UK.
Yes, and this is a really important piece of context. Because in many settings in countries like the US and the UK, having and voicing opinions isn't just acceptable, it's often expected.
Expected. How so?
Well, it's often seen as part of being engaged, showing you're thinking critically about the topic, whether it's a work meeting, a class discussion, or even just a dinner table conversation. Staying silent when opinions are being shared might sometimes be interpreted, maybe unfairly, as disinterest or lack of understanding.
Oh, that's a crucial difference. So if you come from a cultural background where maybe expressing strong personal opinions, especially if they differ, is considered impolite or disruptive,
Mm,
you need to adapt.
You often do, yes. You need to adjust not just the phrases you use, but perhaps your overall willingness to jump in and share your perspective. The level of directness that's considered normal can vary hugely.
So the sources mention the US-UK approach is often direct but polite. What does that look like in practice?
It might mean someone feels comfortable saying, actually, I disagree with that point, but they will almost always immediately follow up with because, or here's why I see it differently. The direct disagreement is there, but it's coupled with reasoning, making it about the issue, not a personal attack.
Okay, so the reasoning softens the directness. How does that compare to other approaches?
Well, it contrasts with cultures where any kind of direct no or I disagree might be avoided to maintain harmony.
Hmm.
In those contests, people might use more indirect strategy.
Like that example given in the source material, saying something like, that's an interesting idea first.
Exactly. Saying that's an interesting idea, acknowledges the speaker, shows you heard them, but it doesn't actually signal agreement or disagreement. It's a polite holding phrase, while you perhaps prepare to introduce your own, possibly very different idea.
Ah, so a buffer, a way to respond positively without committing before pivoting.
Precisely. It's a face-saving strategy, very common in some cultures. Understanding these different underlying values, directness versus harmony, helps make sense of why communication styles differ.
And this difference must be especially important in professional settings, right? Where collaboration is key.
Absolutely critical. The sources really emphasize this. While you're expected to have and contribute opinions at work, the way you do it is paramount. Workplace culture, especially in collaborative teams, usually values respect, teamwork, and finding solutions together. Anything that sounds too confrontational can really damage relationships and hinder progress.
So blunt disagreement is generally a no-go.
Usually, yes. You wouldn't typically say, that's a bad idea, or you're wrong about that. Instead, you'd reach for much softer, more collaborative language.
Like that great example they gave. Let's look at this from a different angle.
Isn't that brilliant? It achieves so much.
Yeah.
It doesn't say the current angle is wrong. It just suggests exploring alternatives. It uses let's, which is inclusive and collaborative. It frames it as adding possibilities, not shooting something down.
Yeah, it's very constructive.
Totally. Other phrases work similarly. Have we considered? Or what if we thought about? Or maybe one potential challenge with that approach might be. Or I wonder if another way to look at it could be.
Always to introduce alternatives or critiques without being directly negative or confrontational.
Exactly. They focus on the problem or the idea, not the person, and they invite further discussion rather than shutting it down. Nailing this kind of language, as the material highlighted, is key for effective teamwork and maintaining a respectful, productive work environment.
That's such a valuable insight. It's not just about having an opinion. It's about reading the room, understanding the cultural context, the specific situation like work versus casual chat, and choosing your language accordingly. It's about communication effectiveness, really, and building good relationships.
It really is. It's the whole package, not just the grammar.
Okay, this has been incredibly practical, I think. We've gone through stating opinions clearly, the vital importance of backing them up with reasons, handling agreement both full and partial, and navigating disagreement politely, plus the cultural context. Now, the crucial next step, practice.
Yes, knowledge is one thing, but making it an active skill takes practice. The material had a great simple challenge task for you, the listener, to try.
Let's lay it out.
Okay, step 1. Pick a simple question that invites an opinion. The one suggested is a good starting point. Do you think smartphones are good or bad? Everyone has thoughts on that.
Okay, got the question. Step 2.
Step 2. State your opinion, but consciously use one of those introductory phrases we talked about. Don't just say good or bad. Use in my opinion, or I personally believe, or from my point of view. Pick one.
Frame it properly. Got it. Step 3.
Step 3. Add at least one reason to support your opinion. And try to use one of the linking phrases. Because the reason is, for example. Put it all together into 1 or 2 clear sentences.
Okay, let's model that with the smartphone example. Let's say, I think they're generally good. How would I combine those steps?
You could say, in my opinion, smartphones are mostly a good thing because they give us instant access to so much information and connection. For example, I can video call my family overseas anytime I want, which just wasn't possible before.
Perfect. Intro phrase, in my opinion, linking word because, and a specific example, video call family. That feels like a complete, well-supported thought.
Exactly. Now, what if you lean the other way, thinking they're more bad than good?
Okay, let's try. I personally believe that smartphones have become quite detrimental, especially to face-to-face communication. One reason for this is that people often seem more absorbed in their phones than in the conversations happening right in front of them.
Excellent. Different intro phrase, I personally believe. Slightly different linker, especially implying cause, and a reason connected with. One reason for this is. Both examples show how to construct that solid opinion statement.
So the challenge for you listening is, take this structure, pick a topic you actually care about, maybe your favorite type of music, the benefits of exercise, your opinion on remote work, the best way to travel, anything.
Something you have genuine thoughts on.
And try formulating your opinion using these steps. Use an opener, state your view, and add a because, or a for example, say it out loud maybe, or jot it down, just go through the process.
That active recall and application is what makes it stick. The more you deliberately practice using from my point of view, or I see your point, Beto, the more natural and automatic they'll become.
You'll start to feel much more confident expressing yourself in those moments.
Absolutely.
And just a quick look ahead, based on the material we reviewed, our next deep dive is set to tackle something else super practical. Common grammar mistakes that English learners often make, and crucially, how to spot them and fix them.
Oh yeah, that's always a useful one. Smoothing out those persistent little errors can really boost your fluency and how clear you sound.
Definitely something to look forward to. So as we wrap up this deep dive on opinions, the big takeaway, I think, is that expressing yourself effectively in English involves more than just knowing the right words.
Much more.
It's about understanding the structure, framing your idea, supporting it logically. It's about reading the social and cultural context, knowing when to be direct, when to be softer, and it's about having those specific phrases ready for stating, reasoning, agreeing, and disagreeing politely.
Well put. And maybe one more tip. Actively listen to how native or proficient English speakers around you do it. When they share an opinion in a meeting or in a movie or in conversation, what phrases do they use? How do they disagree? You could learn a lot just by observing.
That's a great point. Pay attention to the language in action every time you consciously choose, I would say. Instead of just blurting something out, or you pause to think, okay, why do I think this? And formulate a reason.
Yeah.
You're actively improving.
You're building that communication muscle.
Yeah.
It's not just about language accuracy. It's about rhetorical skills, social awareness. It really unlocks deeper conversations and more meaningful participation.
It really does.
So keep talking, keep noticing, keep practicing. Enjoy the process of finding your voice and sharing your unique perspective in English.
Couldn't agree more. Until our next deep dive.